So is the blackness behind the open window. Inside, both offer shelter from the elements and from predators. The extractor fan is really just a ledge that can support a nest, but it's man-made, plastic instead of natural stone. The shape and structure of the two nests are in every way identical. In fact, both sites possess the ideal nesting conditions needed to successfully raise a family. With your help, we searched the country for unusual nests and were amazed by the response. Six young great tits, fully feathered and almost ready to leave the nest. For more than a month now, the post office have diverted their deliveries. In fact, 8 out of 10 tits in woodland will choose specially made nest boxes rather than tree cavities to nest in. This is because the boxes offer all the ideal nest requirements in one easy package. And to a tit, there can be little difference between the slit of a letterbox and the gap in the bark of a tree. How does the post office feel about their role as suppliers of nursery facilities?
Nested post boxes tend to be something that's confined to the rural areas, and whilst we've got no hard and fast policy for dealing with such things, what will happen is that usually the postman will spot it. He will put a notice on the box to make sure that people don't post letters into that box, and then he will warn the people who live round and about. Hopefully they will then hand the letters either to the postman or into the local post office. We, for our part, will continue to check that box throughout until the birds leave the box to make sure that no mail is left in the box for any length of time.
A brilliant example of an opportunist hole nester. The starlings that chose this site have assumed that it had cast iron security. They had no way of knowing that they could face possible eviction and that their success depended entirely on the goodwill of the postman. That is the question. Just what are the qualities that make a successful nest?
It has to be sturdily built, away from predators. It has to be close to a readily available food supply and sited where the chicks can make their first flight successfully. Surprisingly, these design features are met not only by natural nest sites, such as trees, but also by some seemingly bizarre ones. Just one example is this pylon. But if you think about it, to a rook, a pylon and a tree are much the same thing.
The pylon has a wide central structure with branching arms like the trunk and branches of a tree. Rooks wedge their nests in the forks of branches for stability, and this design strategy doesn't alter wherever the site may be. If anything, a pylon is more windproof than a tree. You don't see many pylons blown down in storms. If a single pylon represents a tree, perhaps this is a metal forest. Several species of bird have become penthouse neighbours here, each realising the benefits. Too steep a climb for a hungry stoat or cat. In fact, downright dangerous, even for your average wildlife cameraman. I kept my visit short and sweet.
A family of kestrels is nesting in this railway lighting tower near Sheffield. This avenue of metal towers provides a very secure artificial forest for the birds to nest in, and the grassland and scrubland either side is ideal for them to find food. It's odd combinations of wildland and man-made structures like this that attract birds like kestrels and magpies into areas that previously were unsuitable for nesting.
Kestrels, a 20th century success story. They never build their own nest structure, so kestrels can adapt to any number of weird locations, from old nests of other species to bare ledges. Their remarkable ability to hover enables them to hunt over the smallest areas of land, the sort of abandoned rough ground you can find in any town.
Here in the northeast, some species of seabird have been phenomenally successful in recent years. As a result, the competition for a natural nest site has been intense. 18 years ago, one pair of one species had the courage to start a colony on this warehouse.
Now, 123 pairs of kittiwakes are nesting here. In the 1960s, a baby boom sent their numbers rocketing by 50%. This led to a chronic shortage in the highly desirable Cliff Ledge market with adjacent food facilities. So they moved inland. Even with extra space here, the colony is still jam-packed. The nest's as close as 30 centimetres. If it's a ledge, it's a nest site. Front, side, rear, all are under occupation.
Now, first glance, it might not appear to be the best place for a nesting seabird. It's in the middle of the city centre. But to the kittiwakes, it represents nothing more nor less than a man-made cliff.
Kittiwakes build one of the strongest, most compact types of gull nest. A mixture of their own droppings and mud, cemented to the ledge, gives the birds a firm grip in what can be a very hostile environment. Perhaps one of the advantages of nesting inland is shelter from the storms at sea. The more robust herring and lesser blackback gulls have also become townies. Their decision to abandon a coastal residence has been made by their stomachs. Our rubbish provides a huge unnatural food supply, always available, easy to exploit. In the city, these large gulls usually choose flat open roofs. That's because on the coast, they nest on flat cliff tops. Within a coastal colony, very strict territories exist. Around each nest is an area of about a square metre, a definite no-go zone for other gulls. A complex system of ritual movements ensures that boundaries are respected. Tugging a piece of grass means keep off. On the rooftops, the birds pull at shingle and roofing felt instead of grass, but the language and the purpose are the same. As a gull, the tougher you are, the more chance your chicks have for survival.
These chicks are given an incredibly varied diet by their parents. It can range from hamburgers and spaghetti or pizzas to maybe fish from the local docks. But the fact that all their food is plentiful and very close by means that these chicks grow faster than their cliff-top cousins.
Nests aren't merely a pile of twigs. A lot of other materials can come in very useful too.
Imagine building a nest out of material like this. It's not too comfortable, but some birds do. I've got a selection of strange nests here. This song thrush nest is made out of wire and springs and bits of swarf. The crow started by using a normal mud base and then went on to use wire again and bits of plastic and the odd nut and bolt. This apparently normal blackbird nest is in fact lined with cigarette butts. And this one, my favourite, a silver nest, and it's been preserved in a shoebox since 1945, made entirely of anti-radar tinsel with one feather and just a couple of leaves.
Some birds find the abundance of strange materials an irresistible temptation, while other nests contain such things more by chance than by real choice. This grebe has used a large plastic sheet and other floating rubbish as a base on which to build a conventional nest. Some birds can push the tolerance of their human landlords to the limit. James Gilbert was having a serious problem.
A pair of starlings have nested in the tail of my aeroplane all the 8 years that I've had it. You see them flying around and they sit up there with bits of straw and grass in their beaks and then hop down here and scoot in through this hole here. It's a huge nest, it almost fills the tail here. And I have to remove it before I can fly because the control wires for the stabilator run through there and the counterbalance weight for the stabilator is also in there and it would be dangerous to fly with it. Birds' nests can be a real menace, particularly if they build in the engine area. You can build a large loose nest of straw in the engine and it can ignite from the hot exhaust and you could have a fire in the engine compartment, which is the last thing you want. I do feel a bit of a savage having to take their nest out, but they seem to put it back pretty quickly. They can put it back overnight. I've known them do that before. I know that as soon as I've tied the aeroplane down again and walk away, they're going to be back there putting the nest back in again. I think they probably use the same bits of straw that I've so carefully pulled out. In fact, sometimes I come back here, I see them sitting on the buildings waiting for me to taxi the aeroplane up so they can go back to work.
Hello, Jane. Are they still here?
Yes, up in the corner. Take a look.
Fantastic. These birds are quite incredible. They've chosen to nest in a box on top of this kitchen cabinet.
Robins certainly seem to be the boldest of birds. This kitchen was in constant use, with children continually trooping in and out. But this just illustrates one of the characteristics of the robin, its apparent tolerance of man. Couple that with its habit of nesting inside structures with large entrances, and the robin is set to exploit the nest sites that few other birds would dare to use. During the making of this programme, your robin stories poured in. 13-year-old Mark Rance told us about this nest in his lean-to.
The crash helmet was my brother's. He owned a motorbike,
And when he sold the motorbike, he kept the crash helmet and put it up on a shelf. The first thing that I ever saw of a robin was when he was taking in twigs into the crash helmet and building up a big, large nest in it. The next thing I saw, there was a female with him. And while they were out getting food, I looked into the crash helmet and I saw 4 lovely chicks with their mouths open wide, gaping at me. That was really lovely. That was the best thing ever.
I'm a comb merchant with a small yard in the village of Charfield. Last year we had an unusual experience with one of the lorries that we were forced not to use it for some period of time, 5 to 6 weeks, due to a robin that had nested amongst the bags. We decided to let it stop there, even though we did need the lorry, but being as soft we are, it seemed the only thing to do, really.
Now this is a smart place to hatch your eggs. Guaranteed skilled attention. Ward sister Debbie Reed told us about some untidy maternity inpatients.
Well, we noticed about a month ago a lot of leaves and nest material coming through the window, but we didn't actually think it was a bird. We just thought it was leaves coming off a tree, just coming through the windows because it's quite windy. And it wasn't until the painters came in to decorate the toilet area that we noticed that the nest was being built on the top shelf in the patients' toilets. We actually had to close the toilets while the painters were in decorating, and it was whilst they had their peace and quiet, you know, there's no patients going in, it was whilst it was quiet the nest was actually built. We really love having the birds there. It's very interesting. Everybody in the hospital's aware that we've got baby birds on the ward now, and they're all asking us about them. The patients enjoy looking at them when we take them in. We don't take them in too often at the moment because the birds are a bit timid, but everybody really enjoys having them on the ward. And we hope they come back next year.
Perhaps the nest that best explained the behaviour of all your robins was the one found in Christine Webb's peg bag. This desirable residence, situated within a modern structure, yet itself complying to classic design, featuring an accessible circular entrance, sheltered, and close to all local amenities. Need I say more about the parallels we can draw in this situation? Peg bag, kettle or tree, it's all the same to a robin. At the Barbican in London, that real world was going to be quite a shock for Jean Anderson's duck family.
The duck is here directly below me in the window box. We're on the 7th floor. It is very dangerous because there's nothing but brick and concrete below us. And it's quite a problem when we reach what we call duck day to get the ducklings down. We had a duck that came last year, and we were able to launch 7 out of 9 eggs, 2 of them having been stillborn. This year we hope that we will get all of the ducklings down, and it's quite a fiasco, and it really becomes duck day. I have a box which I use to lower them over the side, so when I throw the duck out of the nest, I can put the ducklings into the box and lower the ducklings to a friend of mine on the podium, and the duck is able to see them, the complete process all the way through.
The secret of this operation is to make sure the mother duck can hear her young as they're lowered. Their contact calls encourage her not to desert a brood. It all looks pretty drastic, but it's proved 100% successful so far. Without help, some chicks from this nest would probably die during the fall. But in nature, failures can serve as a lesson for the future. The female would probably learn from experience and select a less dangerous nest site next time. But as it is, 9 healthy ducklings is confirmation for the duck of a nest well positioned, and that means somewhere to lay eggs again for years to come. So perhaps our well-meaning tolerance, even help, is not always in the bird's own long-term interest. Storks are the birds that often spring to mind when one thinks of impressive, unusual nesters. You've got to hand it to these big birds. They certainly choose nest sites that stick out like sore thumbs. Many European towns are blessed with such a nest, belonging to these so-called lucky birds. They have no winged enemies, so can afford such conspicuous homes. But the most unusual nest in the world? I don't think so. They've become far too familiar.
This nest in Ribe, the oldest town in Denmark, is as much a part of the scenery as the cathedral nearby. Through the ages, man has contributed to the success of these birds, first by cutting down trees and clearing large feeding areas, and then by providing nest sites with cartwheels and similar platforms. The storks have adapted to an unusual nest site and turned it into the norm.
In fact, in Europe, many more storks nest on buildings than on trees. What about ospreys as candidates for the world's weirdest nesters? They usually nest in trees, but in Florida they've developed stork-like habits. Here, it's not uncommon to find them nesting on the marker buoys in the middle of busy waterways. They're even found on the top of telegraph poles and more solid structures, like this car park floodlight. Astonishing, but not actually that unusual. We thought that for a nest to be extraordinary, it must really push a bird to the limits of its nesting capabilities.
I'm in Denmark, about to board a ferry that will take me from the port of Spotsberg across a small stretch of sea to the island of Lolland. I have to do a bit of travelling to see this unusual nest.
Travelling was literally the only way that I was going to see this incredible nest, containing chicks that will have travelled more than 4,000 miles even before they can fly.
Here, just inside the open stern, are two house martin nests. The parent birds follow the ship, commuting backwards and forwards several times every day in order to feed the chicks. These nests are really quite special. There are very few other types of bird that could successfully raise a family under these conditions, but the house martins have all the qualities that enable them to do well here. Their food is all around us, the thousands of flying insects that populate the airways. They're strong flyers, so the toing and froing is no problem, and they build a very strong, secure nest that's able to withstand a lot of vibration and movement. So these house martins seem to have found the perfect spot. After all, what could be safer than a constantly moving nest?
When young, the chicks can slow their metabolisms, so they don't starve even if there's an unusually long wait between meals. Just one of the strategies that make the commoner garden house martin our candidate for the most unusual nester in